This public domain work is on the Cross, a romance of the Passion Play at Oberammergau by Wilhelmine von Hillern. Chapter 12. Bridal Torches. Magdalene, wife, angel, what shall I call you? Cried Freya, extending his arms. Oh, if only we were not in the open fields, that I might press you to my heart and thank you for being so kind, so generous and so kind. Does your heart at last yearn for me? Then let us come into the forest, where no one is watching us save holy nature. Take me up one of the mountains. Will you? Can you? Will not your hay spoil? Let it spoil, what does that matter? But first you must allow me to go home to put on garments more suitable for your society. No, that will be too late. Remain as you are. You are handsome in any clothes, she whispered, blushing faintly, like a girl, while she lowered her eyes from the kingly figure to the ground. A happy smile flitted over her face. Stooping, she picked up the jacket which he had removed while doing his work. And you, are you equipped for mountain climbing? Oh, we will not go far, not farther than we can go and return in time for dinner. Come then, if matters come to the worst, I will take my dove on my shoulder and carry her when she can walk no farther. Oh, happy freedom, cried the Countess joyously. To wander through the woods, like two children in a fairy tale, enchanted by some wicked fairy and unable to appear again until after 1,000 years. Oh, poetry of childhood, for the first time you smile upon me in all your radiance. Come, let us hasten. It is so beautiful that I can hardly believe it. I shall not, until we are there. She flew rather than walked by his side. My dove, suppose that we were enchanted and forced to remain in the forest together 1,000 years. Let us try it, she whispered, fixing her eyes on his till he murmured, panting for breath. I believe the spell is beginning to work. And his eyes glowed with a gloomy fire as he murmured, watching her, who knows whether I am not harbouring the Lorelei herself, who is luring me into her kingdom to destroy me? What do you know of the Lorelei? Freya stopped. Do you suppose I read nothing? What else should I do during the long evenings, when, wearied by my work, I am resting at home? Really? She asked absently, drawing him forward. Do you suppose I could understand a woman like you if I had not educated myself a little? Alas, we cannot accomplish much when the proper foundation is lacking. The untrained memory retains nothing firmly except what passes instantly into flesh and blood, the perception of life as it is reflected to us from the mirror of art. But even this reflection is sometimes distorted and confuses our natural thoughts and feelings. Alas, dear one, a person who has learned nothing correctly and yet knows the yearning for something higher without being able to satisfy it, is like a lost soul that never attains the goal for which it longs. My poor friend, I do know that feeling. To a certain extent it is the same with us women. We too have the yearning for education and finally attain only a defective amount of knowledge. But, by way of compensation, individuality, directness, intuitiveness are developed all the more fully. You did not need to know anything. Your influence is exerted through your personality, as such you are great. All knowledge comes from man and is attainable by him. The divine gift of individuality can neither be gained nor bestowed any more than intuition. What is all the logic of reflecting reason compared with the gift of intuition, which enabled you to assume the part of a god? Is not that a greater marvel than the hard-won result of systematic study at the desk? You are a kind comforter, said Freya. Thinking makes people old, she continued. It has aged the human race too. Nature, simplicity, love must restore its youth. In them is direct contact with the deity. In civilization, only an indirect one. Fortunately for me, I have put my lips to their spring. O eternal fountain of human nature, I drink from you with eager draughts. They had entered the forest. The treetops rustled high above their heads, and at their feet rippled a mountain stream. Madeleine von Hillern was silent. Her heart rested on her friend's broad breast, heaving with the rapid throbbing of his heart. Her supple figure had sunk wearily down by his side. Say no more. Not a word is needed here. The deep gloom of the woods surrounded them, a sacred stillness and solitude. On every height there dwells repose, echoed in soft melody above her head, the marvellous Rubinstein Goethe song. There was no human voice. It seemed like a mere breath from the distance of a dream, like the wind sweeping over the chords of the cymbal hung by Lenau's gypsy on a tree, scarcely audible, already dying away again. Her ear had caught the notes of that Aeolian harp once before. She knew them again on the cross, with the words, "Into thy hands I commend my spirit." And sweet as the voice which spoke at that time was now the tenor that softly, softly hushed the restless spirit of the worldling to slumber. Wait, soon, soon. And then the notes gradually rose till the whole buzzing, singing woodland choir seemed to join in the words, "Thou too shalt soon rest." The mysterious sound came from the depths of the great heart on which she rested, as if the soul had quitted the body a few moments and now, returning, was revealing with sweet lamentation what it had beheld in the invisible world. "Are you weeping?" he asked tenderly, kissing the curls which clustered round her forehead. "My child. Oh, when you utter that word, I have a feeling which I never experienced before. Yes, I am. I wish to be a child in your hands." Only those who have ever tasted the delight of casting the burden of their own egoism upon any altar, whether it be religion or love, yielding themselves up, becoming absorbed in another higher power, only those can know my emotions when I lean on your breast and you call me your child. Thus released from ourselves, thus free and untrammeled must we feel when we have stripped off in death the fetters of the body and merged all which is personal to us in God. Heaven has destined you for itself, and you already feel how it is loosening your fibres and gradually drawing you up out of the soil in which you are rooted. That is why you wept when I sang that song to you here in the quiet woodland solitude. Such tears are like the drops the tree weeps when a name is cut upon it. At such moments you feel the hand of God tearing open the bark which the world has formed around your heart, and the sap wells from the wounded spot. Is it not so? He gently passed his hand over her eyes, glittering with unshed tears. "Ah, noble soul, how you penetrate the depths of my being. What is all the wit and wisdom of the educated mind compared with the direct inspiration of your poetic nature? Freya, spring of the earth, Christ, spring of humanity. My heart is putting forth its first blossom for you, take it." She threw herself with closed eyes upon his breast, as if blindly. He clasped her in a close embrace, holding her a long time silently in his arms. Then he said softly, "I will accept the beautiful blossom of your heart, my child, but not for myself." He raised his eyes fervently upward. "O God, thou hast opened thy hand to the beggar, and made him rich that he may sacrifice to thee what no king could offer. I thank thee." Something laughed above their heads. It was a pair of wild doves cooing in the green tent over them. "Do you know why they are laughing?" asked the Countess in an altered tone. "They are laughing at us? Magdalena! Yes, they are laughing at the self-tormenting doubt of God's goodness. Look around you. See the torrent foaming, and the blue gentians drinking its spray. See the fruit-laden hazel, the sacred tree which sheltered your childhood. See the bilberries at your feet, all the intoxicating growth and movement of nature, and then ask yourself whether the God who created all this warm, sunny life is a God who only takes, not gives. Do you believe he would have prepared for us this spring of love, that we may let its blossoms wither on the cold altar of duty or of prejudice? No, take what he bestows, and do not question. "Do not lead me into temptation, Magdalena," he gently entreated. "I told you this morning that you do not know what you are unloosening." He stood before her as if transfigured. His eyes glowed with the sombre fire which had flashed in them a moment early that morning. A rustling like eagle's pinions ran through the forest. Jupiter was approaching in human form. The beautiful woman sat down on a log with her hands clasped in her lap. "A man like me loves but once, but with his whole being. I demand nothing, but what is given to me is given wholly, or not at all, for if I once have it, I will never give it up save with my life. Not long since a stranger came here, who sang the song of the Asras, who die when they love. I believe I am of their race. Woman, do not toy, do not trifle with me, for no, I love you with the fatal love of those Asras." Madeleine von Wildnau trembled with delight. "If I once touch your lips, the barrier between us will have fallen. Will you forgive me if the flood tide of feeling sweeps me away, till I forget who you are and what a gulf divides the Countess Wildenau from the low-born peasant?" "Oh, that you can remind me of it, in this hour," cried the Countess, with sorrowful reproach. He looked almost threateningly into her eyes. The dark locks around his head seemed to stir like the bristling mane of a lion. "Woman, you do not know me. If you deceive me, you will betray the most sacred emotion ever felt by mortal man, and it will be terribly avenged. then the flame you are kindling will consume either you or me, or both. You see that I am now a different man. Formerly you have beheld me only when curbed by the victorious power of my holy task. You have conjured up the spirits, now they can no longer be held in thrall. Will you not be terrified by the might of a passion which is unknown to you people of the world, with your calm self-control? I, terrified by you, cried the proud woman in a tone of exultant rapture. Oh, this is power, this is the very breath of the gods. Should I fear amid the element for which I longed, which was revealed to me in my own breast? Does the flame fear the fire? The Titaness dread the Titan. Ah, Zeus, hurl thy thunderbolt, and let the forest blaze as the victorious torch of nature at last released from her long bondage. He sat down by her side, his fiery breath fanning her cheek. Then you will try it, will give me the kiss I dared not take today, yes. But it will be a betrothal kiss, yes. He opened his arms, and as a black moth settles upon a fragrant tea rose, hovering on its velvet wings above the dewy calyx, he bent his head to hers, shadowing her with his dark locks, and pressed his first kiss upon Madeleine von Wildenau's quivering lips. But such moments tempt the gods themselves, and Jupiter hovered over the pair, full of wrath, for he envied the Christian mortal the beautiful woman. He had heard her laughingly challenge him in the midst of the joy she had stolen from the gods, and the heavens darkened. The hurricanes saddled the steeds of the storm, awaiting his beck, and down flashed the fire from the sky. A shrill cry rent the air. The highest tree in the forest was cleft asunder, and the bridal torch lighted by Jupiter blazed aloft. The gods are averse to it, said Freya gloomily. Defy them, cried the Countess, starting up. They are powerless. We are in the hands of a higher ruler. Woman, you do not belong to this world, or you have no nerves which can tremble. Tremble, she laughed happily. Tremble, by your side. Then, nestling closer still, she murmured, I am as cowardly as ever woman was, but where I love, I have the courage to defy death. Even were I to fall now beneath a thunderbolt, could I have a fairer death than at this moment? You would willingly die for your Christ, and I for mine. Well then, come you noble woman, that I may shield you as well as I can. Now we shall see whether God is with us. I defy the elements. He proudly clasped the object of his love in his arms and bore her firmly on through the chaos into which the whole forest had fallen. The tempest, howling fiercely, burst its way through the woods. The boughs snapped, the birds were hurled about helplessly. The destroying element seemed to come from both heights and depths at the same time, for it shook the earth and tore the roots of trees from the ground till the lofty trunks fell shattered and, rolling down the mountain, swept everything with them in the sudden ruin. With fiendish thirst for battle, the fiery sword flamed from the sky amid the uproar, dealing thrust after thrust and blow after blow, while here and there scarlet tongues of flame shot hissing upward through the dry branches. A torrent of rain now dashed from the clouds, but without quenching the flames, whose smoke was pressed down into the treetops, closely interlaced by the tempest. Like a gigantic black serpent, it rolled its coils from every direction, stifling, suffocating with the glowing breath of the forest conflagration, and the undulating cloud body bore with it in glittering, flashing sparks millions of burning pine needles. Well, soul of fire, is the heat fierce enough for you now? Asked Freya, pressing the beautiful woman closer to his side to shield her with his own body. Are you content now? Yes, she said, gasping for breath, and the eyes of both met, as if they felt only the fire in their own hearts and had blended this with the external element into a single sea of flame. Nearer, closer drew the fire in ever-narrowing circles around the defiant pair. More and more sultry became the path. Brighter grew the hissing blaze through which they were compelled to force their way. Now on the left, now on the right, the red-eyed conflagration confronted them amid the clouds of smoke and flame, half stifled by the descending floods of rain, yet pouring from its open jaws hot, scorching steam, fatal to labouring human chests, and obliged the fugitives to turn back in search of some new opening for escape. If the rain ceases, we are lost, said the Countess with the utmost calmness. Then the fire will be sole ruler. Freya made no reply. Steadily, unflinchingly, he struggled on, grasping with the strength of a Titan the falling boughs which threatened the Countess' life, shielding with both arms her uncovered head from the flying sparks, and ever and anon sprinkling her hair and garments from some bubbling spring. The water in the brooks was already warm. Throngs of animals fleeing from the flames surrounded them, and birds with scorched wings fell at their feet. It was no longer possible to go down, the fire was raging below them. They were compelled to climb up the mountain and seek the summit. "Only have courage. Forward," were Freya's sole words. And upward they toiled, through the pathless woods, through underbrush and thickets, over roots of trees, rolling stones and rocks, never pausing, never taking breath, for the flames were close at their heels, threatening them with their fiendish embrace. Where the path was too toilsome, Freya lifted the woman he loved in his arms and bore her over the rough places. At last the woods grew thinner. The boundary of the flames was passed. They had reached the top, were saved. The neighing steeds of the wind received them on the barren height and strove to hurl them back into the fiery grave. But Freya's towering form resisted their assault and, with powerless fury, they tore away the rocks on the right and left and rolled them thundering down into the decks below. And the water pouring from the clouds drenched the lovers like a billow from the sea, beating into their eyes, mouths, and ears till, blinded and deafened, they were obliged to grope their way along the cliff. The garments of the beautiful Madeleine von Hillern hung around her in tatters, heavy as lead. Her hair was loosened, dripping and dishevelled. She was trembling from head to foot with cold in the icy wind and rain here on the heights, after the heat and terror below in the smouldering thicket. "I know where there is a herder's hut. I'll take you to it. Cling closely to me. We must climb still higher." They silently continued the ascent. The Countess staggered with fatigue. Freya lifted her again in his arms, and, by almost superhuman exertion, bore her up the last steep ascent to the hut. It was empty. He placed the exhausted woman on the herder's straw pallet, where she sank fainting. When she regained her consciousness, she was supported in Freya's arms, and her face was wet with his tears. She gazed at him as if waking to the reality of some beautiful dream. "Is it really you?" she asked, with such sweet childlike happiness as she threw her arms around him that the strong man's brain and heart reeled as if his senses were failing. "You are alive. You are safe." He could say no more. He kissed her dripping garments, her feet, and tenderly examined her beautiful limbs to assure himself that she had received no injury. "Thank heaven!" he cried joyously amid his tears. "You are safe." Then, half staggering, he rose. "Now, in the presence of the deadly peril we have just escaped, tell me whether you really love me, tell me whether you are mine, wholly mine. Or hurl me down into the blazing forest. It would be more merciful by heaven than to deceive me." "Joseph!" cried the Countess, clinging passionately to him. "Can you ask that? Now? Alas, I cannot understand how a poor, ignorant man like me can win the love of such a woman. What can you love save the illusion of the Christ, and when that has vanished, what remains?" "The divine, the real love," replied the Countess with a lofty expression. "Oh, I believe that you are sincere. But if you have deceived yourself, if you should ever perceive that you have overestimated me, it would be far better for me to be lying down below amid the flames than to experience that. There is still time. Consider well, and say, what shall it be?" "Consider," replied the Countess, drawing his head down to hers. "Tell the torrent to consider ere it plunges over the cliff, to dissolve into spray in the leap. Tell the flower to consider ere it opens to the sunbeam which will consume it. Will you be more petty than they? What is there to consider when a mighty impulse powerfully constrains us? Is not this moment worth risking the whole life without asking, what is to come of it? Then I have been mistaken in you, and it will be better for us to part while there is yet time. Oh, enchantress, you are right. I no longer know myself. Part now. No, it is too late. I am yours, body and soul. Be it so then, I will barter my life for this moment, and no longer doubt, for I can do nothing else." Sinking on his knees before her, he buried his face in her lap. Madeleine von Hillern embraced him with unspeakable tenderness, yet she felt the burden of a heavy responsibility resting upon her, for she now realized that she was his destiny. She had what she desired, his soul, his heart, his life. Nay, had he possessed immortality, he would have sacrificed that too for her sake. But now the god had become human. The choice was made. And, with a secret tear, she gazed upon the husk of the beautiful illusion which had vanished. "What is the matter?" he asked suddenly, raising his head and gazing into her eyes with anxious foreboding. "You have grown cold." "No, only sad." "And why?" "Alas, I do not know. Nothing in this world can be quite perfect." She drew him tenderly toward her. "This is one of those moments in which the highest happiness becomes pain. The fury of the elements could not harm us. but it is a silent, stealing sorrow which will appease the envy of the gods for unprecedented earthly bliss, mourning for my Christus." Freya uttered a cry of anguish and, starting up, covered his face with both hands. "Oh, that you are forced to remind me of it," he rushed out of the hut. What did this mean? The beautiful mistress of his heart felt as if she had deceived herself when she believed him to be exclusively her own, as if there was something in the man over which she had no power. Filled with vague terror, she followed him. He stood leaning against the hut as if in a dream and did not lift his eyes. The sound of alarm bells and the rattle of firearms echoed from the valley. The rain had ceased, and columns of flame were now rising high into the air, forming a crimson canopy above the trees in the forest. It was a wild scene, this glowing sea of fire into which tree after tree gradually vanished, the air quivering with the crash of the falling boughs, from which rose a shower of sparks and a crowd of shrieking birds eddying amid the flames. Joseph Freya did not heed it. The Countess approached almost timidly. "Joseph, have I offended you?" "No, my child, on the contrary. When I reminded you today of the obligations of your rank, you were angry with me, but I thank you for having remembered what I forgot for your sake. Well, but spite of the warning, I was not ashamed of you and did not disown you before the Countess Wildenau. But you, Joseph, are ashamed of me in the presence of Christ." He gazed keenly, sorrowfully at her. "I ashamed of you. I deny you in the presence of my Redeemer, who is also yours. I deny you because I am forced to confess to him that I love you beyond everything else. Nay, perhaps more than I do him. Oh, my dearest, how little you know me. May the day never come which will prove which of us will first deny the other, and may you never be forced to weep the tears which Peter shed when the cock crowed for the 3rd time." She sank upon his breast. "No, my beloved, that will never be. In the hour when that was possible, you might despise me." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "I should not do that, any more than Christ despised Peter. You are a child of the world. Could treachery to me be charged against you if the strong man, the disciple of Christ, was pardoned for treason to the holiest? Oh, my angel!" "It would be treason to the holiest," said the Countess with deep emotion, "if I could deny you." "Why, for heaven's sake, Herr Freya," shouted a voice, and the herdsman came bounding down the mountainside. "Can you stand there so quietly, amid this destruction?" The words died away in the distance. "The man is right," said the Countess in a startled tone. "We are forgetting everything around us. Whoever has hands must help. Go, leave me alone here, and follow the herdsman." "There is no hope of extinguishing the fire. The wood is lost," replied Freya indifferently. "It is fortunate that it is an isolated piece of land, so the flames cannot spread. But, good heavens, at least try to save what can yet be secured. That is only neighbourly duty." "I shall not leave you, happen what may. But I am safe, and perhaps some poor man's all is burning below. What does it matter in this hour? What does it matter?" The Countess indignantly exclaimed. "Joseph, I do not understand you. Have you so little feeling for the distress of your fellow men, and yet play the Christ?" Freya gazed at the destruction with a strange expression. His noble figure towered proudly aloft against the gloomy, cloud-veiled sky. Smiling calmly, he held out his hand to the woman he loved and drew her tenderly to his breast. "Do not upbraid me, my dove. The wood was mine." Chapter 13. Banished, from Eden. Silence reigned on the height. The winds had died away, the clouds were scattering swiftly, like an army of ghosts. The embers of the wood below crackled softly. The trunks had all been gnawed to the roots by the fiery tooth of the flames. It was like a churchyard full of clumsy black crosses and grave stones on which the souls danced to and fro like will-o'-the-wisps. The Countess rested silently on Freya's breast. When he said, "The wood was mine," she had thrown herself, unable to utter a word, into his arms, and had since remained clasped in his embrace in silent, perfect peace. Now the misty veil, growing lighter and more transparent, at last drifted entirely away, and the blue sky once more arched above the earth in a majestic dome. Here and there sunbeams darted through the melting cloud rack, and suddenly, as though the gates of heaven had opened, a double rainbow, radiant in 7-hued majesty, spanned the vault above them in matchless beauty. Freya bade the Countess look up, and when she perceived the exquisite miracle of the air, with her lover in the midst, encompassed by it, she raised her head and extended her arms like the bride awaiting the heavenly bridegroom. Her eyes rested on him as if dazzled. Be what you will, man, seraph, god, shining one, you must be mine. I will bring you down from the height of your cross, though you were nailed above with sevenfold irons. You must be mine. Freya, hear my vow, hear it, ye surrounding mountains, hear it, sacred soil below, and thou radiant many-hued bow which, with the grace of Aphrodite, dost girdle the universe, risen from chaos. I swear to be your wife, Joseph Freya. Swear it by the God who has appeared to me, rising from marvel to marvel, since my eyes first beheld you. Freya, with bowed head, stood trembling before her. He felt as if a goddess was rolling in her chariot of clouds above him, as if the glimmering prism above were dissolving and flooding him with a sea of glittering sparks. You, my wife? He faltered, sobbing, then flung himself face downward before her. This is too much, too much. You shall be my husband, she murmured, raising him. Let me call you so now until the priest's hand has united us. When, where, and how this can be done, I do not yet know. Let the task of deciding be left to hours devoted to the consideration of earthly things. This is too sacred. It is our spiritual marriage hour, for in it I have pledged myself to you in spirit and in truth. Our church is nature, our witnesses are heaven and earth, our candles the blazing wood below, your little heritage which you sacrificed for me with a smile, and so I give you my bridal kiss, my husband. But Freya did not return the caress. The old conflict again awoke, the conflict with his duty as the representative of Christ. O God! Is it not the tempter whom thou didst send to thy own son on empty Hebron, that he might show him all the splendours of the world, saying, all shall be thine? Dare I be faithless to the character of thy chaste son, if thou dost appoint me to undergo the same trial? Dare I be happy, dare I enjoy, so long as I wear the sacred mask of his sufferings and sacrifice? Will it not then be a terrible fraud, and dare I enter the presence of God with this lie upon my conscience? Will he not tear the crown of thorns from my head and exclaim, Juggler, I wish to rise by the pure and saintly, not by deceivers who feign my sufferings and with deceitful art turn the holiest things into a farce? Woe betide me, poor, weak mortal that I am. The trial is too severe. I cannot endure it. Take thy crown. I place it in thy hands again, and will personate the Christ no more. Joseph, exclaimed Countess Wildenau, deeply moved, must this be? I feel your anguish and am stirred as if we were parting from our dearest possession. She raised her tearful eyes heavenward. Must the Christ vanish on the very day I plight my troth to him, whom I love as thy image, even as Eve must have loved Adam for the sake of his likeness to God? And must I, like Eve, no longer behold thy face, because I have loved the divine in mortal form after the manner of mortals? Unhappy doctrine of the fall of man, which renders the holiest feeling a crime. Must we too be driven out of paradise? Must you stand between us and our happy intercourse with the deity? Joseph, do you believe that the Saviour who came to bring redemption to the poor human race banished from Eden will be angry with you if you represent with a happy loving heart the sacrifice by which he saved us? I do not know, my beloved, you may be right. Even the time-honoured precepts of our forefathers permit the representative of the Christ to be married. Yet I think differently. The highest demands claim the loftiest service. Whoever is permitted to personate the Saviour should have at that time no other feelings than moved Christ himself, for truth may not be born of falsehood. He drew the weeping woman to his heart. You know, sweet wife, to love you and call you mine is a very different thing from the monotonous commonplace matrimonial happiness which our plain village women can bestow. You demand the whole being, and every power of the soul is consumed in you. He clasped her in an embrace so fervent that her breath almost failed. His eyes blazed with the passionate ardour with which the unchained elements seize their prey. Say what you will, it is on your conscience. I can feel nothing, think of nothing save you. Nay, if they should drive the nails through my own flesh, I should not heed it, in my ardent yearning for you. I have struggled long enough, but you have bewitched me with the sweet promise of becoming my wife, and I am spoiled for personating the Christ. I am yours, take me. Only fly with me to the farthest corner of the world, away from the place where I was permitted to feel myself a part of God, and resigned it for an earthly happiness. Come then, my beloved, let us go forth like the pair banished from Eden, and like them take upon us, for love's sake, our heavy human destiny. Let us bear it together, and even in exile love and worship, like faithful cast-off children, the Father who was once so near us. Amen. said Freya, clasping the beautiful woman who thus devoted her life to him in a long, silent embrace. A rainbow above their heads gradually paled. The radiant splendor faded. The sun was again concealed by clouds, and the warm azure of the sky was transformed into a chill grey by the rising mists. The mountain peak lay bare and cheerless. The earth was rent and ravaged. Nothing was visible save rough rubble and colourless heather. An icy fog rose slowly, gathering more and more densely around them. Nothing could be seen save the sterile soil of the naked ridge on which stood the two lonely outcasts from Eden. The gates of their dream paradise had closed behind them. The spell was broken, and in silent submission they moved down the hard, stony path to reality, the cruel uncertainty of human destiny. Chapter 14. Hyeta. Twilight was gathering when the pair reached the valley. The Passion Theatre loomed like a vast shadow by the roadside, and both, as if moved by the same impulse, turned toward it. Freya, drawing a key from his pocket, opened the door leading to the stage. "Shall we take leave of it?" he said. "Take leave." The Countess said no more. She knew that the success of the rest of the performances depended solely upon him, and it burdened her soul like a heavy reproach. Yet she did not tell him so, for hers he must be, at any cost. The strength of her passion swept her on to her robbery of the cross, as the wind bears away the leaf it has stripped from the tree. I entered the property room. There stood the stake, there lay the scourges which lacerated the sacred body. The spear that pierced his heart was leaning in a corner. Madeleine von Wildenau gazed around her with a feeling of dread. Freya had lighted a lamp. Something close beside it flashed, sending its rays far through the dim space. It was the cup, the communion cup. Freya touched it with a trembling hand. "Farewell, I shall never offer you to anyone again. May all blessings flow from you. Happy the hand which scatters them over the world, and my beloved Amergau." He kissed the brim of the goblet, and a tear fell into it, but it glittered with the same unshadowed radiance. Freya turned away, and his eyes wandered over the other beloved trophies. There lay the reed sceptre broken on the floor. The Countess shuddered at the sight. A strange melancholy stole over her, and tears filled her eyes. "My sceptre of reeds, broken, in the dust!" said Freya, his voice tremulous with an emotion which forced an answering echo in Madeleine von Wildenau's soul. He raised the fragments, gazing at them long and mournfully. "Aye, the sad symbol speaks the truth. My strength is broken, my sovereignty vanished." A terrible dread overpowered the Countess, and she fondly clasped the man she loved, as a princess might press to her heart her dethroned husband, grieving amid the ruins of his power. "You will still remain king in my heart," she said consolingly, amid her tears. "You must now be everything to me, my loved one. In you is my heaven, my justification in the presence of God. Hold me closely, firmly, for you must lift me in your arms out of this constant torture by the redeeming power of love." He rested his head wearily on hers, and she gladly supported the precious burden. She felt at that moment that she had the power to lift him from Hades, that the love in her heart was strong enough to win heaven for him and herself. "Womanly nature is drawing us together." She clung to him, so absorbed in blissful melancholy that his soul thrilled with an emotion never experienced before. Their lips now met in a kiss as pure as if all earthly things were at an end, and their rising souls were greeting each other in a loftier sphere. "That was an angel's kiss," said Freya with a sigh, while the air around the stake seemed to quiver with the rustling of angels' wings, the chains which bound him to it for the scourging to clank, as though some invisible hand had flung one end around the feet of the fugitives to bind them forever to the place of the cross. "Come, I have one more thing to do." He took the lamp from the table and went into the dressing room. There hung the raiment in which a god revealed himself to mortal eyes. The ample garments stirred mysteriously in the draught from the open door. A glimmering white figure seemed to be soaring upward in one corner. It was the resurrection robe. Inflated by the wind, it floated with a ghost-like movement, while the man, divested of his divinity, stood with clasped hands and drooping head, to say farewell. When a mortal strips off his earthly husk, he knows that he will exchange it for a brighter one. Here, a mortal was stripping off his robe of light and returning to the oppressive form of human imperfection. This, too, was a death agony. The Countess clung to him tenderly. "Have you forgotten me?" He threw his arm around her. "Why, sweet one?" "I mean," she said with childlike grace, "that if you thought of me you could not be so sad." My child, I forget you at the moment. I am resigning heaven for your sake. You do not ask that seriously. As for the pain, let me endure it. For if I could do this with a light heart, would the sacrifice be worthy of you? By the anguish it costs me, you must measure the greatness of my love if you can. I can, for even while I rest upon your heart, while my lips eagerly inhale your breath, I pine with longing for your lost divinity. And no longer love me as you did when I was the Christ. Be frank, it will come. He pressed his hands upon his breast, while his eyes rested mournfully on the shining robe which seemed to beckon to him from the gloom. Oh, what are you saying? You sacrifice for me the greatest possession which man ever resigned for woman, the illusion of deity, and I am to punish you for the renunciation by loving you less. Joseph, what you give me, no king can bestow. Crowns have been sacrificed for a woman's sake, crowns of gold, but never one like this. My wife, he murmured in sweet, mournful tones, while his dark eyes searched hers till her very soul swooned under the power of the look. She clasped her hands upon his breast. Will you grant me one favour? If I can. Ah, then, appear to me once more as the Christ. I will go out upon the stage, throw the sacred robe over you. Let me see him once more, clasp his knees. Let me take farewell, an eternal farewell of the departing one. My child, that would be a sin. Are you again forgetting what you yourself perceived this morning with prescient grief? That I am a man. Dare I continue the sacred character outside of the play? That would be working wrong under the mask of my Saviour. No, it would be no wrong to satisfy the longing for his face. I will not touch you, only once more, for the last time show my wondering eyes the sublime figure, and let the soul pour forth all the anguish of parting to the vanishing God. My wife, where is your error carrying you? Did the God-man I personated vanish because I stripped off his mask? Poor wife, the anguish which now masters you is remorse for having in your sweet womanly weakness destroyed the pious illusion and never rested until you made the imaginary God a man. O Magdalena, how far you still are from the goal gained by your predecessor. Come, I will satisfy your longing. I will lead you where you will perceive that he is everywhere, if we really seek him, that the form alone is perishable. He is imperishable. Then gently raising her, he tenderly repeated, Come, trust me, and follow me. Casting one more sorrowful glance around him, he took from the table the crown of thorns, extinguished the lamp, and with a steady arm guided the weeping woman through the darkness. Outside of the building, the stars were shining brightly, the road was distinctly visible. The Countess unresistingly accompanied him. He turned toward the village, and they walked swiftly through the silent streets. At last the church rose, dark and solemn, before them. He led her in. A holy water font stood at the entrance, and, pausing, he sprinkled her with the water. Then they entered. The church was dark. No light illumined it save the trembling rays of the ever-burning lamp, and 2 candles flickering low in their sockets before an image of the Madonna in a remote corner. They were obliged to grope their way forward slowly amid the wavering shadows. At the left of the entrance stood a Pieta. It was a group almost life-size, carved from wood. The crucified Saviour in the Madonna's lap. Mary Magdalene was supporting his left hand, raising it slightly, while John stood at the Saviour's feet. The whole had been created by an artist's hand with touching realism. The expression of anguish in the Saviour's face was very affecting. Before the group stood a prie-dieu on which lay several withered wreaths. The Countess's heart quivered. He was leading her there. So this was to be the compensation for the living image, mere dead wood. Freya drew her gently down upon the prie-dieu. Here, my child, learn to seek him here, and when you have once found him, you will never lose him more. Lay your hands devoutly on the apparently lifeless breast, and you will feel the heart within throbbing as in mine. Only try. Alas, I cannot. It will be a falsehood if I do. What? That of falsehood and I? Was I the Christ? I could imagine it, because I breathed. Ah, the breath of the deity can swell more than a human breast, sister, and you will hear it. Collect your thoughts, and pray. His whisper grew fainter, the silence about her more solemn. I cannot pray. I never have prayed, she lamented, and surely not to lifeless wood. Only try, for my sake, he urged gently, as if addressing a restless child, which ought to go to sleep and will not. Yes, but stay with me, she pleaded like a child clinging to his arm. I will stay, he said, kneeling by her side. "Teach me to pray as you do," she entreated, raising her delicate hands to him. He clasped them in his, and she felt as if the world could do her no further harm, that her soul, her life, lay in his firm hands. The warmth emanating from him became in her a devout fervour. The pulses of ardent piety throbbing in his fingertips seemed to communicate a wave, light motion to the surrounding air, which imparted to everything which hitherto had been dead and rigid, an undulating movement that lent it a faint, vibrating life. Something stirred, breathed, murmured before and above her. There was a rustling among the withered leaves of the garlands at the foot of the Pieta. Invisible feet glided through the church and ascended the steps of the high altar. High up the vaulted dome rose a murmur which wandered to the folds of the funeral banner, hanging above, passing from pillar to pillar, from arch to arch, in ghostly echoes which the listening air heard with secret terror, the language of the silence. And the burning eyes beheld the motionless forms begin to stir. The contours of the figures slowly changed in the uncertain, flickering light. The shadows glided and swung to and fro. The Saviour's lips opened, then slowly closed. The kneeling woman touched the rigid limbs and laid her fevered fingers on the wounded breast. The other hand rested in Freya's. A chain was thus formed between the three, which thrilled and warmed the wood with the circulating stream of the hot blood. It was no longer a foreign substance. It was the heart, the poor pierced heart of their beloved divine friend. It throbbed, suffered, bled. More and more distinctly, the chest rose and fell with the regular breathing. It was the creative breath of the deity, which works in the conscious and unconscious object, animating even soulless matter. The arm supported by Mary Magdalene swayed to and fro. The fingers of the hand moved gently. The poor pierced hand, it seemed as if it were trying to move toward the Countess, as if it were pleading, "Cool my pain." Urged by an inexplicable impulse, the Countess warmed the stiff, slender fingers in her own. She fancied that it was giving relief. Higher and higher swelled the tide of feeling in her heart until it overflowed, and, she knew not how, she had risen and pressed a kiss upon the wounds in the poor little hand, a kiss of the sweetest, most sacred piety. She felt as if she were standing by a beloved corpse whose mute lips we seek, though they no longer feel. She could not help it, and bending down again, the rosy lips of the young widow rested on the pale, half-parted ones of the statue. The lips breathed. A cool, pure breath issued from them, and the rigid form grew more pliant beneath the sorrowful caress, as though it felt the reconciling pain of the penitent human soul. But the divine fire which was to purify this soul blazed far beyond its boundaries in this first ardour. Overpowered by a wild fervour, she flung herself on her knees and adjured the God whose breath she had drunk in that kiss to hear her. The friend praying at her side was forgotten. The world had vanished. Every law of reason was annihilated. All knowledge was out of her mind. Every hard-won conquest of human empiricism was effaced. From the heights and from the depths it came with rustling pinions, bearing the soul away on the flood tide of mercy. The miracle was approaching, in unimagined majesty. Thousands of years vanished. Eternity dawned in that one moment. All that was and is, was not and is not, past, present and future were blended and melted into a single breath beyond the boundaries of the natural life. "If it is thou, if thou dost live, look at me," she had cried with ardent aspiration. And, lo, was it shadow or imagination? The eyes opened, and two large dark pupils were fixed upon her. Then the lids closed for an instant to open again. The Countess gazed more and more earnestly. It was distinct, unmistakable. A shudder ran through her veins as, in a burning fever, the limbs tremble with a sudden chill. She tried to meet the look, but spite of the tension in every nerve, the effort was futile. It was too overpowering. It was the gaze of a god. Dread and rapture were contending for the mastery. Doubtless, she said to herself, it is not outside of you, but within you. Once more she ventured to glance at the mysterious apparition, but the eyes were fixed steadily upon her. Terror overpowered her. The cord of the possible snapped, and she sank half senseless on the steps of the altar, while the miracle closed its golden wings above her. Chapter 15. The crowing OFTHECOCK. A loud step roused the rapt enthusiast from her visions. The sacristan was passing through the church, extinguishing the candles which, meanwhile, had burned down in their sockets before the Madonna in the distant corner. "I beg your pardon for disturbing you," he said, "but I wanted to close the church. There is plenty of time, however. Shall I leave a candle? It will be too dark. The lamp alone does not give sufficient light." "I thank you," replied Freya, more thoughtful than the Countess, who, unable to control herself, remained on her knees with her face buried in her hands. "I will lock the church when we leave it, and bring you the key," Freya added, and the sacristan was satisfied. The imperious high priest withdrew silently and modestly, that he might not disturb the prayers of the man whom he sentenced to death every week with such fury. The lovers were again alone, but the door remained open. The shrill crowing of a cock suddenly echoed through the stillness from the yard of the neighbouring parsonage. The Countess started up. Her eyes were painfully dazzled by the light of the wax candle so close at hand. Before her, the face smeared with shining varnish, lay the wooden Christ, hard and cold in its carven bareness and rigidity. The pale blue painted eyes gazed with the traditional mournfulness upon the ground. "What startled you just now?" asked Freya. "I don't know whether it was a miracle or a shadow which created the illusion, but I would have sworn that the statue moved its lids and looked at me." "Be it what it might, it was still a miracle," said Freya. "If the finger of God can paint the Saviour's eyes to the excited vision from the wave of blood set in motion by the pulsation of our hearts, or from the shadow cast by a smoking candle, is that any less wonderful than if the stiff lids had really moved?" The Countess breathed a long sigh of relief. "Yes, you are right. That is the power which, as you say, can do more than swell a human breast. It can make, for the yearning soul, a heart-throb even in a Christ carved from wood. Even if what I have just experienced could have been done by lifeless matter, the power which brought us together was divine, and no one living could have resisted it. Lay aside your crown of thorns trustfully, and without remorse. You have accomplished your mission. You have saved the soul for which God destined you. It was his will, and who among us could resist him?" Freya raised the crown of thorns, which he still held, to his lips, kissed it, and laid it at the feet of the Peter. "Lord, thy will be done, in so far as it is thy will. And if it is not, forgive the error." "It is no error. I understand God's purpose better. He has sent me his image in you, and given it to me in an attainable human form, that I may learn through it to do my duty to the prototype, to the feeble power of the novice in faith. He graciously adds an earthly guide. Oh, he is good and merciful." She raised Freya from his knees. "Come, thou God-given one, that I may fulfill the sweetest duty ever imposed on any mortal, that of loving you and making you happy. God and his holy will be praised. And will you no longer grieve for the lost Christ? No, for you were right. He is everywhere. In God's name, then, come and obey the impulse of your heart, even though I perish. Can you speak so today, Joseph? Today especially? Would you not just now have sworn to the truth of an illusion conjured up by a shadow? And were you not disappointed when the light came and the spell vanished? The time will come when you will see me, as you now do this wooden figure, in the light of commonplace reality, and then the nimbus will vanish and nothing will remain save the dross as here. Then your soul will turn away, disenchanted, and follow the vanished God to loftier heights." "Or plunge into the depths," murmured the Countess. "I should not fear that, for then my mission would have been vain. No, my child, if I did not believe that I was appointed to save you, I should have no excuse in my own eyes for what I am doing. But come, it is late. We must return home, or our absence will occasion comment." It was 9:30. An elderly gentleman of distinguished aristocratic bearing was pacing impatiently to and fro. The two sisters were standing helplessly in the doorway, deeply oppressed by the burden of so haughty a guest. "If she would only come," Safie lamented in the utmost anxiety, for she dreaded the father for the daughter's sake. It was the old Prince von Prankenberg, and his bearing augured nothing good. It seemed to these loyal souls a democratic impertinence on the part of fate that such a gentleman should be kept waiting, and the prince regarded it in precisely the same light. The good creatures would willingly have lent wings to the daughter for whom such a father was waiting. But what did it avail that the noble lord constantly quickened his pace as he walked to and fro, time and his unsuspicious daughter did not do the same? Prince Prankenberg had reached Ammergau at noon that day, and waited in vain for the Countess. On his arrival he had found the whole village in an uproar over the conflagration in the woods, and the Countess and her Freya, who had been seen walking together in that direction, were missing. At last the herder reported that they had been in the mountain pasture with him, and Ludwig Gross, on his return from directing the firemen in the futile effort to extinguish the flames, set off to inform the Countess Wildenau of her father's arrival. He had evidently failed to find her, for he ought to have returned long before. So the faithful women had been on coals of fire ever since. Andreas Gross had gone to the village to look for the absent ones, as if that could be of any service. Josepha was gazing sullenly through the window, pains at the prince, who had treated her as scornfully as if she were a common maidservant, when she offered to show him the way to the countess's room, and answered, "People can't stay in such a hole." Meanwhile, night had closed in. At last, coming from exactly the opposite direction, a couple approached whose appearance attracted the nobleman's attention. A female figure, bareheaded, with dishevelled hair and tattered, disordered garments, leaning apparently almost fainting on the arm of a tall, bearded man in a peasant's jacket. Could it? No, it was impossible. That could not be his daughter. The unsuspecting pair came nearer. The lady, evidently exhausted, was really almost carried by her companion. It was too dark for the prince to see distinctly, but her head seemed to be resting on the peasant's breast. An interesting pair of lovers. But they drew nearer. The prince could not believe his eyes. It was his daughter, leaning on a peasant's arm. There was an involuntary cry of horror from both, as Countess Wildenau stood face to face with her haughty father. The blood fairly congealed in Madeleine's veins, her cheeks blanched till their pallor glimmered through the gloom. Yet the habit of maintaining social forms did not desert her. Oh, what a surprise! "Good evening, Papa." Her soul had retreated to the inmost depths of her being, and she was but a puppet moving and speaking by rule. Freya raised his hat in a farewell salute. "Are you going?" she said with an expressionless glance. "I suppose I cannot ask you to rest a little while?" "Farewell, Herr Freya, and many thanks." How strange. Did it not seem as if a cock crowed? Freya bowed silently and walked on. "Adieu," said the prince without lifting his hat. For an instant he considered whether he could possibly offer his aim to a lady in such attire, but at last resolved to do so. She was his daughter, and this was not exactly the right moment to quarrel with her. So, struggling with his indignation and disgust, he escorted her, holding his arm very far out, as though he might be soiled by the contact, through the house into her room. The Gross sisters, with trembling hands, brought in lights and hastily vanished. Madeleine von Wildenau stood in the centre of the room, like an automaton whose machinery had run down. The prince took a candle from the table and threw its light full upon her face. "Pardon me, I must ascertain whether this lady, who looks as if she had just jumped out of a gypsy cart, is really my daughter. Yes, it is actually she," he exclaimed in a tone intended to be humorous, but which was merely brutal. "So I find the Countess Wildenau in this guise, ragged, worn, with neither hat nor gloves, wandering about with peasants. It is incredible." The Countess sank into a chair without a word. Her father's large, stern features were flushed with a wrath which he could scarcely control. "Have you gone out of fashion so completely that you must seek your society in such circles as these, ma fille? Could no cavalier be found to escort the Countess Wildenau, that she must strike up an intimacy with one of the comedians in the Passion Play?" "An intimacy?" "Papa, this is an insult!" exclaimed the Countess angrily, for though it was true, she felt that on his lips and in his meaning it was such. Again a cock crowed at this unwonted hour. "Well, ma chère, when a lady is caught half-embraced by such a man, the inference is inevitable." "Dear me, I was so exhausted that I could scarcely stand," replied the Countess, softly, as if the cocks might hear. "We were caught by the storm, and the man was obliged to support me. I should think, however, that the Countess Wildenau's position was too high for such suspicions." "Well, well, I heard in Munich certain rumours about your long stay here which accorded admirably with the romantic personage who has just left you. My imaginative daughter always had strange fancies, and as you seem able to endure the peasant odour, I am somewhat more sensitive to it." "Papa!" cried the Countess, frantic with shame. "I beg you not to speak in that way of people whom I esteem." "Aha!" said the prince with a short laugh. "Your anger speaks plainly enough. I will make no further allusion to these delicate relations." The Countess remained silent a moment, struggling with her emotions. Should she confess all? Should she betray the mystery of the God in man? Reveal it to this frivolous, prosaic man, from whose mockery, even in her childhood, she had carefully concealed every nobler feeling? Disclose to him her most sacred possession, the miracle of her life? No, it would be desecration. I have no delicate relations. I scarcely know these people. I am interested in this Freya as the representative of the Christ. He is nothing more to me." The seed crowed for the third time. "What was that?" "I am continually hearing cocks crow tonight." "Did you hear nothing?" asked the Countess. "Not the slightest sound. Have you hallucinations?" asked the Prince. "The cocks are all asleep at this hour." She knew it. The sound was but the echo of her own conscience. She thought of the words Freya had uttered that day upon the mountain, and his large eyes gazed mournfully yet forgivingly at her. Now she knew why Peter was pardoned. He would not suffer the God in whom he could not force men to believe to be profaned, so he concealed him in his heart. He knew that the bond which united him to Christ, and the work which he was appointed to do for him, was greater than the cheap martyrdom of an acknowledgment of him, to the dull ears of a handful of men and maidservants. It was no lie when he said, "I know not the man," for he really did not know the Christ whom they meant. He was denying, not Christ, but the criminal whom they believed him to be. It was the same with the Countess. She was not ashamed of the man she loved, only of the person her father saw in him, and, as she could not explain to the Prince what Joseph Freya was to her, she denied him entirely. But even as Peter mourned as a heavy sin, the brief moment in which he faithlessly separated from his beloved master, she, too, now felt a keen pang, as though a wound was bleeding in her heart, and tears streamed from her eyes. "You are nervous, Marfia. It isn't worth while." "Tears for the sake of that worthy villager," said the Prince with a contemptuous shrug of the shoulders. "Listen, ma chère, I believe it would be better for you to marry." "Papa," exclaimed the Countess indignantly. The Prince laughed. "No offence. When women like you begin to be sentimental, it is time for them to marry. You were widowed too young. It was a misfortune for you." "A misfortune? May God forgive you the sneer and me the words. It was a misfortune that Wildenau lived so long, nay more, that I ever became his wife, and you, Papa, ought never to remind me of it." "Why not?" "Because I might forget that you are my father, as you forget it when you sold me to that greybeard." "Sold? What an expression, chère enfant! Is this the result of your study of peasant life here? I congratulate you on the enlargement of your vocabulary. This is the gratitude of a daughter for whom the most brilliant match in the whole circle of aristocratic families was selected." "And her soul sold in exchange," the Countess interrupted, "for that my moral nature was not utterly destroyed is no credit of yours." The Prince smiled with an air of calm superiority. "Capital, moral nature destroyed, when a girl is wedded to one of the oldest members of the German nobility and made the possession of a yearly income of 500,000. That is what she calls moral destruction, and an outrageous deed, of which the inhuman father must not remind his daughter without forfeiting his paternal rights." "It is positively delicious," he laughed and drew out his cigar case. "You see, ma fille, I understand a jest. Will you be annoyed if I smoke a Havana in this rural bedroom?" "As you please," replied the Countess, who had now regained her former cold composure, holding the candle to him. The Prince scanned her features with the searching gaze of a connoisseur as she thus stood before him, illumined by the ruddy glow. "You have lost a little of your freshness, my child, but you are still beautiful, still charming. I admit that Wildenau was rather too old for a poetic nature like yours, but there is still time to compensate for it. When were you born?" A father ought not to ask his daughter's age, but the Almanac de Gotha tells the story. "You must be now. Stop. You were not quite 17 when you married Wildenau. You were married 9 years. You have been a widow too. That makes you 28. There is still time, but not much to lose. I am saying this to you in a mother's place, my child," he added, with a repulsive affectation of tenderness. His daughter made no reply. "It is true, you will lose your income if you give up the name of Wildenau, as the will reads exchange it for another. This somewhat restricts your choice, for you can resign this colossal dower only in favour of a match which can partially supply your loss." The Countess turned deadly pale. "That is the curse Wildenau hurled upon me from his grave. It was not enough that I was miserable during his life. No, I must not be happy even after his death." "Why? Who has told you so? You have your choice among any of the handsome and wealthy men who can offer you an equivalent for all that you resign. Prince von Metten-Barnheim, for instance. He is a visionary, it is true." "Prosaic Prince Emiel, a visionary," said the Countess, laughing bitterly. "Well, I think that a man who surrounds himself so much with plebeian society, scholars and authors, might properly be termed a visionary." When his father dies, the luckless country will be ruled by loud-voiced professors. What does that matter? He'll suit you all the better, as you are half a scholar yourself. True, it might be said that the Barnheim family is of inferior rank to ours. The Frankenbergs are an older race, and from the days of Charlemagne have not made a single mésalliance, while the Barnheim genealogical tree shows several gaps, which explains their liberal tendencies. Such things always betray themselves. Yet on the other hand, they are reigning dukes, and we a decaying race, so it is tolerably equal. You are interested in him, so decide at last and marry him, then you will be a happy woman, and the curse of the will can have no power." "Indeed," cried the Countess, trembling with excitement. "But suppose that I loved another, a poor man, whom I could not wed unless I possessed some property of my own, however small, and the will made me a beggar the moment I gave him my hand. What then? Should I not have a right to hate the jealous despot, and the man who sacrificed me to his selfish interests, even though he was my own father?" A glance of the keenest reproach fell upon the prince. He was startled by this outburst of passion, hitherto unknown in his experience of this apathetic woman. He could make no use of her present mood. Biting off a leaf from his cigar, he blew it into the air with a graceful movement of the lips. Some change had taken place in Madeline, that was evident. If, after all, she should commit some folly, make a love match. But with whom? Again the scene he had witnessed that evening rose before his mind. She had let her head rest on the shoulder of a common peasant. That could not be denied, he had seen it with his own eyes. Did such a delusion really exist? A woman of her temperament was incomprehensible. She would be quite capable, in a moment of enthusiasm, of throwing her whole splendid fortune away, and giving society an unparalleled spectacle. Who could tell what ideas such a lunatic might take into her head? And yet, who could prevent it? No one had any power over her, least of all he himself, who could not even threaten her with disinheritance, since it was long since he had possessed anything he could call his own. An old gambler, perpetually struggling with debt, who had come that very day, nay, he was reluctant to confess it to himself. And he had already irritated his daughter, his last refuge, the only support which still kept his head above water, more than was wise or prudent. He dared not venture farther. He had the suppressed brutality of all violent natures which cannot have their own way, are not masters of their passions and their circumstances, and hence are constantly placed in the false position of being compelled to ask the aid of others. After having busied himself a sufficiently long time with his cigar, he said in a soothing and, for so imperious a man, repulsively submissive tone, "Well, ma fille, there is an expedient for that case also. If you loved a man who was too poor to maintain an establishment suitable for you, you might do the one thing without forfeiting the other. Wildenau's will mentions only a change of name. You might marry secretly, keep his name, and with it his property." "Papa!" exclaimed the Countess. A burning blush crimsoned her cheeks, but her eyes were fixed with intense anxiety upon the speaker. "I could not expect that from a husband whom I esteemed and loved." "Why not? If he could offer you no maintenance, he could not ask you to sacrifice yours. Surely it would be enough if you gave him yourself." "If he would accept me under such conditions," she answered thoughtfully. "Aha, we are on the right track," the prince reflected, watching her keenly. "As soon as he perceived that there was no other possibility of making you his, certainly. A woman like you can persuade a man to do anything. I don't wish to be indiscreet, but I fear that you have made a choice of which you cannot help being ashamed. Could you think of forming such an alliance except in secret? If, that is, you must wed. What would the world say when rumour whispered, 'Countess Wildenau has sunk so low that I dare not utter the word, from the fear of offending you?'" The Countess sat with downcast eyes. The world! It suddenly stood before her with its mocking faces. Should she expose her sacred love to its derision? Should she force the noble, simple-mannered man, who was the salvation of her soul, to play a ridiculous part in the eyes of society, as the husband of the Countess Wildenau? Her father was right, though from very different motives. Could this secret, which was too beautiful, too holy, to be confided to her own father, endure the contact of the world? But how could a secret marriage be arranged? She asked with feigned indifference. Prince von Frankenberg was startled by the earnestness of the question. Had matters gone so far? Caution was requisite here. Energetic opposition could only produce the opposite result, perhaps a public scandal. He reflected a moment while apparently toiling to puff rings of smoke into the air, as if the world contained no task more important. His daughter's eyes rested on him with suspicious keenness. At last he seemed to have formed his plan. A secret marriage? Why, that is an easy matter for a woman of your wealth and independent position. Is the person in question a Catholic? Madeleine silently nodded assent. Well, then the matter is perfectly simple. Follow the example of Manzoni's Promessi Sposi, with whom we are sufficiently tormented while studying Italian. Go with your chosen husband to the pastor and declare before him, in the presence of 2 witnesses, who can easily be found among your faithful servants, that you take each other in marriage. According to the rite of the Catholic Church, it is sufficient to constitute a valid marriage if both parties make this declaration, even without the marriage ceremonial, in the presence of an ordained priest. Your ordained priest in this case would be our old pastor at Frankenberg. You can play the farce best there. You will thus need no papers, no special license which might betray you, and if you manage cleverly, you will succeed in persuading the decrepit old man not to enter the marriage in the church register. Then let anyone come and say that you are married. There will be absolutely no proof, and when the old pastor dies, the matter will go down to the grave with him. You will choose witnesses on whom you can depend. What risk can there be? Father, but will that be a marriage? Cried the Countess in horror. Not according to our ideas, said the Prince laconically, but the point is merely that he shall consider himself married, and that he shall be bound, not you. Father, I will not play such a farce, she turned away with loathing. If you are in earnest, there will be no farce, ma chère. It will rest entirely with you whether you regard yourself as married or not. In the former case, you will have the pleasant consciousness of a moral act without its troublesome consequences, can go on a journey after the pseudo-wedding, roam through foreign lands with a reliable maid, and then return perhaps with 1 or 2 adopted children, whom, as a philanthropist, you will educate, and no one can discover anything. The anonymous husband may be installed by the Countess Wildenau under some title on one of her distant estates, and the marriage will be as happy as any, only less prosaic. But you will thus spare yourself an endless scandal in the eyes of society, keep your pastoral dream, and yet remain the wealthy and powerful Countess Wildenau. Is not that more sensible than in heaven knows what rhapsody to sacrifice honour, position, wealth, and your old father? My father? Asked the Countess, who had struggled with the most contradictory emotions while listening to the words of the Prince. Why, yes. He busied himself again with his cigar, which he was now obliged to exchange for another. You know, chère enfant, the duties of our position impose claims upon families of princely rank, which, unfortunately, my finances no longer allow me to meet. I find myself compelled, unpleasant as it is, to appeal to my daughter's kindness. May I use one of these soap dishes as an ash receiver? So I have come to ask whether, for the sake of our ancient name, I expect no childish sentimentality, whether you could help me with an additional sum of some 50,000 marks annually and 90,000 to be paid at once. Otherwise nothing is left for me. A light, please, mercy, except to put a bullet through my head. He paused to light the fresh cigar. The Countess clasped her hands in terror. Good heavens, Papa, are the sums Wildenau gave you already exhausted? What do you mean? Can a Prince Frankenberg live on an income of 50,000 marks? If I had not been so economical, and we did not live in the quiet German style, I could not have managed to make such a trifle hold out so long. A trifle? Then I was sold so cheaply, cried Madeleine Wildenau with passionate emotion. I have not even, in return for my wasted life, the consciousness of having saved my father. Yes, if this is true, I am no longer free to choose. I shall remain to the end of my days the slave of my dead husband, and must steal the happiness for which I long like forbidden fruit. You have chosen the moment for this communication well. It must be true. You have destroyed the first blossom of my life. And now, when it would fain put forth one last bud, you blight that too. The Prince rose. I regret having caused you any embarrassment by my affairs. As I said, you are your own mistress. If I did not put a bullet through my head long ago, it was purely out of consideration for you, that the world might not say, Prince von Frankenberg shot himself on account of financial embarrassment, because his wealthy daughter would not aid him. I wish to save you this scandal. That is why I gave you the choice of helping me if you preferred to do so. The Countess shuddered. You know that such threats are not needed. If I wept, it was not for the sake of the paltry money, but all the unfortunate circumstances. How can I ever be happy, even in a secret marriage, if I am constantly compelled to dread discovery for my father's sake? If it were for a father impoverished by misfortune, the tears shed for my sacrifice of happiness would be worthy of execration. But, Papa, to be compelled to sacrifice the holiest feeling that ever thrilled a human heart for gambling, racecourses, and the women of doubtful reputation who consume your property, that is hard indeed. Spare your words, ma fille. I am not disposed to purchase your help at the cost of a lecture. Either you will relieve me from my embarrassments without reproaches, or you will be the daughter of a suicide. What is the use of all this philosophizing? A lofty, unsullied name is a costly article. Make your choice. I, for my own part, set little value on life. I am old, a victim to the gout, have grown too stiff to ride or enjoy sport of any kind, have lost my luck with women. There is nothing left but gambling. If I must give that up too, then rogue la galera. In such a case, there are but two paths, corrigula fortune, or die. But a Prankenberg would rather die, and to take the former. Father, what are you saying? Alas, that matters have gone so far. Woe betide a society that dismisses an old man from its round of pleasures, so bankrupt in every object, every dignity, that no alternative remains save suicide or cheating at the gaming table, unless he happens by chance to have a wealthy daughter. My beloved child, said the prince, who now found it advisable to adopt a tone of pathos. Pray, say no more, father. You have never troubled yourself about your daughter, have never been a father to me. If you had, you would not now stand before me so miserable, so poor in happiness. This is past change. Alas, that I cannot love and respect my father as I ought, that I cannot do what I am about to do more gladly. Yet I am none the less ready to fulfill my duties towards you. So far as lies in my power, I will afford you the possibility of continuing your pitiful life of shams, and leave it to your discretion how far you draw upon my income. It is fortunate that you came in time. In a few days it might have been too late. I see now that I must not give up my large income so long as my father needs the money. My dreams of a late but pure happiness are shattered. You will understand that one needs time to recover from such a blow and pardon my painful excitement. She rose, with pallid face and trembling limbs. I will place the papers necessary to raise the money in your hands early tomorrow morning, and you will forget this painful scene sooner than I. You have paid me few compliments, but I shall bear no malice. You are nervous today, my fair daughter, and even if you do not bestow your aid in the most generous way, nevertheless you help me. Let me kiss your liberal hand. Ah, it is exactly like your mother's. When I think that those slender, delicate fingers have been laid in the coarse fist of heaven, knows what plebeian, I think great credit is due me. Do not go on, interrupted the Countess imperiously. I think I have done my duty, Papa, but the measure is full, and I earnestly entreat you to let me rest today. It is the fate of fathers to let their daughters rule them, replied the prince in a jesting tone. Well, it is better to be ill-treated by a daughter than by a sweetheart. You see, I too have some moral impulses, since I have been in your strict society. May the father whom you judge so harshly be permitted to kiss your forehead. The Countess silently submitted, but a shudder ran through her frame as if the touch had defiled her. She felt that it was the Judas kiss of the world, not the caress of a father. The prince wiped his mouth with a sensation of secret disgust. Who knows what lips have touched that brow today? He dared not think of it, or it would make him ill. Ma chère, however deeply I am indebted to you, I must assert my paternal rights a few minutes. You have said so many bitter things whose justice I will not deny, that you will permit me to utter a few truthful words also. Fixing his eyes upon her with a stern, cold gaze, he said in a low tone, placing a marked emphasis on every word, We have carried matters very far, you and I, the last of the ancient Prankenberg race. A pretty pair, the father a bankrupt and the daughter, on the eve of marrying a peasant. Madeleine von Wildenau, deadly pale, stood leaning with compressed lips on the back of her armchair. The prince laid his hand on her shoulder. We may both say that today each has saved the other. This is my reparation for the humiliating role fate has forced upon me in your presence. Am I not right? Good night, my queenly daughter, and I hope you bear me no ill will. Chapter 16. Prisoned. The prince had left the room, and she heard him walk through the workshop. Silence fell upon the house and the street. The tortured woman, utterly exhausted, sank upon her bed. Her feet would support her no longer. But she could get no rest. An indescribable grief filled her heart. Everything had happened precisely as Freya had predicted. Before the cock crowed, she had thrice betrayed him in the very hour when she had sworn fidelity. At the first step she was to take on the road of life with the man she loved. At the first glance from the basilisk eyes of conventional prejudice, she shrank back like a coward and could not make up her mind to acknowledge him. This was her purification, this the effect of a feeling which, as she believed, had power to conquer the world. Everything was false. She despaired of all things, of her future, of herself, of the power of Christianity, which she, like all new converts, expected would have the might to transform sinners into saints in a single moment. One thing alone remained unchanged. One image only was untouched by any tinge of baseness amid the turmoil of emotions seething in her heart. Freya. He alone could save her. She must go to him. Springing from her bed, she hurried into the workshop. "Where is your son?" she asked Andreas Gross, who was just preparing to retire. "I suppose he's in his room, Countess. Bring him to me at once." "Certainly, Countess. Shall I undress your Highness?" asked Josepha, who was still waiting for her orders. Madeleine von Wildnau's eyes rested on the girl with a searching expression, as if she saw her now for the first time. Was she faithful? As faithful as a maid must be, to make it possible to carry out the plan her father had suggested. Josepha gazed steadily into the Countess's eyes. Her frank face expressed nothing but innocent wonder at so long a scrutiny. "Yes, you are faithful," said the Countess at last. "Are you not?" "Certainly, Countess," replied the girl, evidently surprised that she needed to give the assurance. "You know what unhappiness means?" "I think so," said Josepha, with bitter emphasis. "Then you would aid the unhappy so far as you were able?" "It would depend upon who it was," answered Josepha brusquely. But the rudeness pleased the Countess. It was a proof of character, and character is a guarantee of trustworthiness. "If it were I, Josepha, could I depend upon you in any situation?" "Certainly," the girl answered simply. "I live only for you. Otherwise I would far rather be under the sod." "What have I to live for except you?" "I believe, Josepha, that I now know the reason Providence sent me to you," murmured her mistress, lost in thought. Ludwig Gross entered. "Did you wish to see me?" Madeleine von Wildenau silently took his hand and drew him into her room. "Oh, Ludwig, what things I have been compelled to hear, what sins I have committed, what suffering I have endured." She laid her arm on the shoulder of the faithful friend, like a child pleading for aid. "What time is it, Ludwig?" "I don't know," he replied. "I was asleep when my father called me. I wandered about looking for you and Freya until about an hour ago, then weariness overpowered me." He drew out his watch. "It is 10:30. Take me to Freya, Ludwig. I must see him this very day." "Oh, my friend, let me wash myself clean in your soul, for I feel as if the turbid surges of the world had soiled me with their mire." Ludwig Gross passed his arm lightly about her shoulders as if to protect her from the unclean element. "Come," he said soothingly, "I will take you to Freya. Or would you prefer to have me bring him here?" "No, he would not come now. I must go to him, for I have done something for which I must atone. There can be no delay." Ludwig hurriedly wrapped her in a warm shawl. "You will be ill from this continual excitement," he said anxiously, but without trying to dissuade her. "Take my arm, you are tottering." They left the house before the eyes of the astonished Gross family. "She is a very singular woman," said Sephi, shaking her head. "She gives herself no rest night or day." It was only 5 days since the evening that Madeleine von Wildnau had walked, as now, through the sleeping village, and how much she had experienced. She had found the God whom she was seeking. She had gazed into his eyes, she had recognized divine, eternal love, and had perceived that she was not worthy of it. So she moved proudly, yet humbly on, leaning upon the arm of her friend, to the street where a thrill of reverence had stirred her whole being when Andreas Gross said, "That is the way to the dwelling of the Christ." The house stood across the end of the street. This time no moonbeams lighted the way. The damp branches of the trees rustled mournfully above them in the darkness. Only a single window on the ground floor of Freya's house was lighted, and the wavering rays marked the way for the pair. They reached it and looked in. Freya was sitting on a wooden stool by the table, his head resting on his hand, absorbed in sorrowful thought. A book lay before him, which he had perhaps intended to read, but evidently had not done so, for he was gazing wearily into vacancy. Madeleine von Wildenau stepped softly in through the unfastened door. Ludwig Gross waited for her outside. As she opened the door of the room, Freya looked up in astonishment. "You," he said, and his eyes rested full upon her with a questioning gaze. But he rose with dignity, instead of rushing to meet her, as he would formerly have greeted the woman he loved had she suddenly appeared before him. "Countess, what does this visit mean, at this hour?" he asked mournfully, offering her a chair. "Did you come alone?" "Ludwig brought me and is waiting outside for me. I have only a few words to say, but it will not do to leave our friend standing outside. You will allow me to call him in?" "Do so. You will then have the satisfaction of having a witness of my humiliation," said the Countess quietly. "Pardon me, I did not think of that interpretation," murmured Freya, seating himself. "May I ask your Highness' commands? Joseph, to whom are you speaking?" "To the Countess Wildenau." She knelt beside him. "Joseph, am I still the Countess Wildenau?" "Your Highness, pray spare me," he exclaimed, starting up. "All this can alter nothing. You remain what you are, and I, what I am. This was deeply graven on my heart tonight, and nothing can efface it." He spoke with neither anger nor reproach, simply like a man who has lost what was dearest to him on earth. "If that is true, I can certainly do nothing except go again," she replied, turning toward the door. "But answer for it to God for having thrust me forth unheard." "Nay, Countess, pray speak," said Freya kindly. She looked at him so beseechingly that his heart melted with unutterable pain. "Come, and tell me what weighs upon your heart," he added in a gentler tone. "Not until you again call me your dove, or your child." Tears filled his eyes. "My child, what have you done?" "That is right. I can speak now. What have I done, Joseph? What you saw, and still worse. I not only treated you coldly and distantly in my father's presence, I afterwards disowned you 3 times, and I come to tell you so because you alone can, and, I know, will forgive me." Freya had clasped his hands upon his knee and was gazing into vacancy. Madeleine continued, "You see, I have so lofty an opinion of you and of your love that I do not try to justify myself. I will only remind you of the words you yourself said today. May you never be forced to weep the tears which Peter shed when the cock crowed for the 3rd time. I will recall what must have induced Christ to forgive Peter. He knew the disciple's heart. Joseph, do you not also know the heart of your Magdalena?" A tremor ran through the strong man's frame, and unable to utter a word, he threw his arm around her, and his head drooped on her breast. "Joseph, you are ignorant of the world, and the bonds with which it fetters even the freest souls. Therefore you must believe in me. It will often happen that I shall be forced to do something incomprehensible to you. If you did not then have implicit faith in me, we could never live happily together. This very day I had resolved to break with society, strip off all its chains. But no matter how many false and culpable ideas it has, its principles, nevertheless, rest upon a foundation of morality. That is why it can impose its fetters upon the very persons who have nothing in common with its immoral side. Nay, were it merely an immoral power, it would be easy, in a moment of pious enthusiasm, to shake off its thrall. But when we are just on the eve of doing so, when we believe ourselves actually free, it throws around our feet the snare of a duty, and we are prisoned anew. Such was my experience today with my father. I should have been compelled to sunder every tie had I told him the truth. I was too weak to provoke the terrible catastrophe, and deferred it by disowning you." Freya quivered with pain. She stroked his clenched hand caressingly. "I know what this must be. I know how the proud man must rebel when the woman he loved did that. But I also expect my angel to know what it cost me." She gently tried to loose his clenched fingers, which gradually yielded till the open hand lay soft and unresisting in her own. "Look at me," she continued in her sweet, melting tones. "Look at my pallid face, my eyes reddened with weeping, and then answer whether I have suffered during these hours." "I do see it," said Freya gently. "Dear husband, I come to you with my great need, with my great love, and my great love. Will you thrust me from you?" He could hold out no longer, but with loving generosity clasped the pleading woman to his heart. "I knew it. You are the embodiment of goodness, gentleness, love. You will have patience with your weak, sinful wife. You will ennoble and sanctify her, and not despair if it is a long time ere the work is completed. You promise, do you not?" she murmured fervently amid her kisses, breathing into his inmost life the ardent pleading of her remorse. And, with a solemn vow, he promised never to be angry with her again, never to desert her until she herself sent him away. She had conquered, he trusted her once more, and now she must profit by this childlike confidence. "I thank you," she said after a long silence. "Now I shall have courage to ask you a serious question. But let us send home the friend who is waiting outside. You can take me back yourself." "Certainly, my child," said Freya, smiling, and went out to seek Ludwig. He was satisfied, he said, returning. "Now speak, and tell me everything that weighs upon your heart. No one can hear us save God." And he drew her into a loving embrace. "Joseph," the Countess began in an embarrassed tone, "the decisive hour has come sooner than I expected, and I am compelled to ask, will you be my husband, but only before God, not men?" Freya drew back a step. "What do you mean?" "Will you listen to me quietly, dearest?" she asked gently. "Speak, my child." "Joseph, I promise today to become your wife, and I will keep the pledge, but our marriage must be a secret one." "And why?" "My husband's will disinherits me as soon as I give up the name of Wildenau. If I marry you, I shall be dependent upon the generosity of my husband's cousins, who succeed me as his heirs, and they are not even obliged to give me an annuity, so I shall be little better than a beggar." "Oh, is that all?" "What does it matter? Am I not able to support my wife? That is, if she can be satisfied with the modest livelihood a poor woodcarver like myself can offer." The Countess, deeply touched, smiled. "I knew that you would say so. But, my angel, that would only do if I had no other duties. But you see, this is one of the snares with which the world draws back those who endeavour to escape its spell. I have a father, an unhappy man whom I can neither respect nor love, a type of the brilliant misery, the hollow shams to which so many lives in our circle fall victims, a gambler, a spendthrift, but still my father. He asks pecuniary aid, which I can render only if I remain the Countess Wildenau. Dare I be happy and let my father go to ruin?" "No!" groaned Freya, whose head sank like a felled tree on the arms which rested folded on the table. "Then what is left to us, my beloved, save separation or a secret marriage? Surely we would not profane the miracle which God has wrought in us by any other course." "No, never." "Well, then I must say to you, choose. Oh, heaven! This is terrible. I must not be allowed to assert my sacred rights before men, must live like a dishonoured man under ban, and where and when could we meet? Joseph, I can offer you the position of steward of my estates, which will enable us to live together constantly and meet without the least restraint. I can recompense you 100-fold. For what you resign here, my property shall be yours, as well as all that I am and have. You shall miss nothing save outward appearances, the triumph of appearing before the world as the husband of the Countess Wildenau. God, thou art my witness that no such thought ever entered my heart. If you were poor and miserable, starving by the wayside, I would raise you and bear you proudly in my arms into my house. If you were blind and lame, ill and deserted, I would watch and cherish you day and night. Nay, it would be my delight to work for you and earn, by my own industry, the bread you eat. When I brought it, I would offer it on my knees and kiss your dear hands for accepting it. But your servant, your hireling, I cannot be. Tell me yourself, could you still love me if I were? Yes, for my love is eternal. Do not deceive yourself. You have loved me as a poor but free citizen of Oberammergau. As your paid servant you would despise me. You shall not be my servant. It is merely necessary to find some pretext before the world which will render it possible for us to be constantly together without exciting suspicion, and the office of a steward is this pretext. Twist and turn it as you will, I shall eat your bread and be your subordinate. Oh, heaven! I was so proud, and am now so terribly humiliated, so suddenly hurled from the height to which you had raised me. It will be no humiliation to accept what my love bestows and my superabundance shares with you. It is, and I could be your husband only on the condition that I might continue to work and earn my own support. Oh, the envious arrogance of the poor, who grudge the rich the noblest privilege, that of doing good. Believe me, true pride would be to say to yourself that your noble nature 1,000 times outweighed the petty sacrifice of worldly goods which I could make for you. He who scorns money can accept it from others, because he knows that the outward gift is valueless compared with the treasures of happiness love can offer. Or do you feel so poor in love that you could not pay me the trivial debt for the bit of bread I furnished. Then indeed, let me with my wealth languish in my dearth of happiness, and boast that you sacrificed to your pride the most faithful of women, but do not say that you love the woman. My dove. I am doing what I can, she continued mournfully. I am offering you myself, my soul, my freedom, my future, and you are considering whether it will not degrade you to eat my bread and be apparently my servant, while in reality you are my master and my judge. I have nothing more to say. You shall have your will, but decide quickly, for what is to be done must be done at once. My father himself, when he perceived that I really intended to marry, advised me to be wedded by our old pastor at Frankenberg. But I know my father, and am aware that he was only luring me into a trap. He will receive from me tomorrow a power of attorney to raise some money he needs. The day after he will invent some new device to keep me in his power. We must take the pastor at Frankenberg by surprise before he can prevent it. Now decide. Omnipotent God, exclaimed Freya. What must I do? Oh, my love, I ought not to desert you, and even if I ought, I could not, for I could no longer live without you. You know that I must take what you offer, and that my fate will be what you assign. But, dearest, how I shall endure to be your husband, and yet regarded as your servant, I know not. If you could let this cup pass from me, it would be far better for us both. And did God spare the Saviour the cup? Was Christ too proud to take upon him his cross and his ignominy, while you cannot even bear the yoke your wife imposes, is forced to impose? He bowed his head to the earth. Tears sparkled in his radiant eyes. He was once more the Christ. As his dark eyes rested upon her in the dim light diffused by the lamp, with all the anguish of the crucified Redeemer, Madeleine von Wildenau again felt a thrill of awe in the presence of something supernatural. A creature belonging to some middle realm, half spirit, half mortal, and the perception that he could never belong wholly to the earth, never wholly to her. She could not explain this feeling. He was so kind, so self-sacrificing. Had she had any idea that such a man was destined to absorb us, not we him, the mystery would have been solved. What she was doing was precisely the reverse. His existence must be sacrificed to hers, and she had a vague suspicion that this was contrary to the laws of his noble, privileged nature. But he, unconscious of himself, in his modest simplicity, only knew that he must love the Countess to the end, and deemed it only just that he should purchase the measureless happiness of calling this woman his by an equally boundless sacrifice. The appeal to Christ had suddenly made him believe that God proposed to give him the opportunity to continue in life the part of a martyr which he was no longer permitted to play on the stage. The terrible humiliation imposed by the woman whom he loved was to be the cross received in exchange for the one he had resigned. Very well then, for the sake of Christ's humility, he said sadly, as if utterly crushed. Give me whatever position you choose, but I fear you will discover too late that you have robbed yourself of the best love I have to bestow. Your nature is not one which can love a vassal. You will be like the children who tear off the butterfly's wings and then throw aside the crawling worm with loathing. My wings were my moral freedom and my self-respect. At this moment I have lost them, for I am only a weak, love-sick man who must do whatever an irresistible woman requires. It is no free moral act, as is usual when a man exchanges an equal existence with his chosen wife. If you think that, Joseph, said the Countess, turning pale, it will certainly be better for me to leave you. She turned with dignity toward the door. Yes, go, he cried in wild anguish. Go, yet you know that you will take me with you, like the crown of thorns you dragged caught in the hem of your dress. He threw himself on his knees at her feet. What am I? Your slave. In heaven's name, be my mistress and take me. I place my soul in your keeping. I trust it to your generosity. But woe betide us both, if you do not give me yours in return. I ask nothing save your soul, but that I want wholly. The exultant woman clasped him in a passionate embrace. Yes, give yourself a prisoner to me, and trust your fate to my hands. I will be a gentle mistress to you. You, beloved slave, you shall not be more mine than I am yours, that is, wholly and forever. Chapter 17. Flying FROMTHE cross. And the burgomaster went to the office every morning at 6 o'clock, for the work to be accomplished during the day was very great and required an early beginning. Freya usually arrived about 7 to share the task with him. On Fridays, however, he often commenced his labour before the energetic burgomaster. It was on that day that the rush upon the ticket office began, and everyone's hands were filled. But today Freya seemed to be in no hurry. It was after 7. He ought to have arrived long before. He had been absent yesterday too. The stranger must have taken complete possession of him. The burgomaster shook his head. Freya's conduct since the Countess' arrival had not pleased him. He had never neglected his duties to the community. And at the very time when the Passion Play had attained unprecedented success, how could anyone think of anything else, anything personal, especially the man who took the part of the Christ? There were heaps of orders lying piled before him. How could they be disposed of if Freya did not help? This countess was a beautiful woman, and probably a fascinating one. But to the burgomaster, there was but one beauty, that of the angel of his home. High above the turmoil of the crowd, in quiet aristocratic seclusion, the lonely man sat at his desk in his bare plain office. But the angel of Oberammergau visited him here. He leaned his weary head upon his breast, his kiss rewarded his unselfish labour, his radiance illumined the unassuming citizen. No house was so poor and insignificant that at this season the angel of Oberammergau did not take up his abode within and shed upon it his own sanctity and dignity. But to him who was the personification of Oberammergau, the man who was obliged to care for everything, watch over everything, bear the responsibility of everything, to him the angel brought the reward which men cannot give, the proud consciousness of what he was to his home in these toilsome days. But it was quite time that Freya should come. The burgomaster rang his bell. The bailiff entered. Kleinhofer, see where Herr Freya is, or the drawing master. One of them can surely be found. Yes, Herr Burgomaster. The man left the room. The burgomaster leaned back in his chair to wait. His eyes rested a few seconds on one of Dor's pictures, Christ condemned by Pontius Pilate. He involuntarily compared the engraving with the grouping on the stage. Ah, if we could do that, if living beings with massive bones and clumsy joints would be as pliable as canvas and brushes, he thought sorrowfully. Wherever human beings are employed, there must be defects and imperfections. Perfection, absolute beauty, exist only in the imagination, yet ought not an inflexible stage manager, by following the lines of the work of art, to succeed in shaping even the rudest material into the artistic idea? Much remains to be done, said the singular stage manager in pitiless self-criticism, resting his head on his hand. When one thinks of what the mining company accomplishes, but of course they work with artists, I with natural talent, then we are restricted in alloting the parts by dilettanti traditional models, and worst of all, by antiquated statutes and prejudices. The vision of Josepha Freya rose before him. He keenly felt the blow inflicted on the Passion Play when the beautiful girl, the very type of Mary Magdalene, was excluded. The whole must suffer under such circumstances. The actors cannot be chosen according to talent and individuality. These things are a secondary consideration. The first is the person standing in the community. A poor servant would be allowed to play only an inferior part, even if he possessed the greatest talent, and the principal ones are the monopoly of the influential citizens. From a contingent thus arbitrarily limited, the manager is compelled to distribute the characters for the great work, which demands the highest powers. It is a gigantic labour, but it will be accomplished. Nothing is needed save patience and an iron will. They will grow with their task. The increasing success of the Passion Play will teach them to understand how important it is that artistic interests should supersede all others. Then golden hours will first dawn on Oberammergau. May God permit me to witness it, he added. And he confidently hoped to do so, for there was no lack of talent, and with a few additions great results might be accomplished. This year the success of the play was secured by Freya, who made the audience forget all less skillful performers. With him, the Passion Play of the present year would stand or fall. The burgomaster's eyes rested with a look of compassion upon the Christ of Dor and the Christ personated by Freya as it hovered before his memory, and Freya bore the test. He had come from the hand of his Creator, a living work of art, perfect in every detail. Thank heaven that we have him, murmured the burgomaster with a nod of satisfaction. Someone knocked at the door. At last, said the burgomaster, come in. It was not the person whom he expected, but Ludwig Gross. He tottered forward as if his feet refused to obey his will. His grave face was waxen, yellow in its hue and deeply lined. His lips were tightly compressed. Drops of perspiration glittered on his brow. The burgomaster glanced at him in alarm. What is it? What has happened? Ludwig Gross drew a letter from his pocket. Be prepared for bad news. For heaven's sake, cannot the performance take place? We have sold more than 1,000 tickets. That would be the least difficulty. Be strong, Herr Burgomaster. I have a great misfortune to announce. Has it anything to do with Freya? Exclaimed the magistrate with sudden foreboding. Freya has gone, with Countess Wildenau, run away, cried the Burgomaster, inexorably giving the act the right name. Yes, I have just found these lines on his table. The Burgomaster turned pale as if he had received a mortal wound. A peal of thunder seemed to echo in his ears, the thunder which had shattered the temple of Jerusalem, whose priest he was. The walls fell, the veil was rent and revealed the place of execution. Golgotha lay before him. He heard the rustling wings of the departing guardian angel of Amergau. High above, in terrible solitude, towered the cross, but it was empty. He who should hang upon it had vanished. Grey clouds gathered around the desolate scene. But from the empty cross issued a light, not a halo, but like the livid, phosphorescent glimmer of rotten wood. It shone into a chasm where, from a jutting rock, towered a single tree, upon which hung, faithful to his task, Judas. A peal of jeering laughter rose from the depths. You have killed yourself in vain. Your victim has escaped. See the conscientious Judas, who hung himself, while the other is having a life of pleasure, shame and disgrace. The Christ has fled from the cross. Malicious voices echo far and wide, cynicism exults. Baseness has conquered. The divine has become a laughingstock for children, the passion play a travesty. The phosphorescent wood of the cross glimmered before the Burgomaster's eyes. Aye, it was rotten and mouldering. This cross, it must crumble. The corruption of the world had infected and undermined it, and this had happened in Oberammergau under his management. The unfortunate man, through whose brain this chain of thoughts was whirling, sat like a stone statue before his friend, who stood waiting modestly, without disturbing his grief by a single word. What the two men felt, each knew, was too great for utterance. The Burgomaster was mechanically holding Freya's letter in his clenched hand. Now his cold, stiff fingers reminded him of it. He laid it on the table, his eyes resting dully on the large, childish characters of the unformed hand. "Forgive me," ran the brief contents. "I am no longer worthy to personate the Saviour. Not from lack of principle, but on account of it do I resign my part. Ere you read these lines, I shall be far away from here. God will not make his sacred cause depend upon any individual. He will supply my place to you. Forget me, and forgive the renegade whose heart will be faithful to you unto death. Freya, postscript, sell my property, the house, the field, and patch of woods which was not burned, and divide the proceeds among the poor of Amergau. I will send you the legal authority from the nearest city. Once more, farewell to all." The Burgomaster sat motionless, gazing at the sheet. He could have read it 10 times over, yet he still stared at the lines. Ludwig Gross saw with terror that his eyes were glassy, his features changed. The calmness imposed by the iron will had become the rigidity of death. The drawing-master shook him. Now, in the altered position, the inert body lost its balance and fell against the back of the chair. His friend caught the tottering figure and supported the noble head. It was possible for him to reach the bell with his other hand and summon Kleinhofer. "The doctor! Quick! Tell him to come at once!" he shouted. The man hurried off in terror. The news that the Burgomaster had been stricken with apoplexy ran through the village like wildfire. Everyone rushed to the office. The physician ran bareheaded across the street. The confusion was boundless. Ludwig could scarcely control the tumult. Supporting the Burgomaster with one arm, he pushed the throng back with the other. The doctor could scarcely force his way through the crowded room. He rubbed the temples and arteries of the senseless man. "I don't think it is apoplexy, only a severe congestion of the brain," he said, "but we cannot tell what the result may be. He has long been overworked and overexcited." The remedies applied began to act. The Burgomaster opened his eyes. But as if he was surrounded by invisible fiends which, like wild beasts, were only held in check by the firm gaze of the tamer, and, ever ready to spring, were only watching for the moment when they might wrest from him the sacred treasure confided to his care. His dim eyes in a few seconds regained the steady flash of the watchful, imperious master. And the discipline which his unyielding will was wont to exert over his limbs instantly restored his erect bearing. No one save the physician and Ludwig knew what the effort cost him. "Yes," said the doctor in a low tone to the drawing-master. "This is the consequence of his never granting himself any rest during these terrible exertions." The Burgomaster had gone to the window and obtained a little air. Then he turned to the bystanders. His voice still trembled slightly, but otherwise not the slightest weakness was perceptible, and nothing betrayed the least emotion. "I am glad, my friends, that we are all assembled, otherwise I should have been compelled to summon you. Is the whole parish here? We must hold a consultation at once. Kleinhofer, count them." The man obeyed. "They are all here," he said. At that moment the burgomaster's wife rushed in with Anastasia. They had been in the fields and had just learned the startling news of the illness of the husband and brother. "Pray be calm," he said sternly. "There is nothing wrong with me, nothing worth mentioning." The weeping women were surrounded by their friends, but the burgomaster, with an imperious wave of the hand, motioned them to the back of the room. "If you wish to listen, and it is my desire that you should, keep quiet. We have not a moment to lose." He turned to the men of the parish. "Dear friends and companions, I have tidings which I should never have expected a native of Ammergau would be compelled to relate of a fellow citizen. A great misfortune has befallen us. We no longer have a Christ. Freya has suddenly gone away." A cry of horror and indignation answered him. A medley of shouts and questions followed, mingled with fierce imprecations. "Be calm, friends. Do not revile him. We do not know what has occurred. True, I cannot understand how such a thing was possible, but we must not judge where we know no particulars. At any rate, we will respect ourselves by speaking no evil of one of our fellow citizens, for that he was, in spite of his act." Ludwig secretly pressed his hand in token of gratitude. "This misfortune is sent by God," the burgomaster continued. "We will not judge the poor mortal who was merely his tool, regard him as one dead, as he seems to regard himself. He has bequeathed his property to our poor. We will thank him for that, as is right. In other respects he is dead to us." The burgomaster took the letter from the table. "Here is his last will for Ammergau. I will read it to you." The burgomaster calmly read the paper, but it seemed as if his voice, usually so firm, trembled. When he had finished, deep silence reigned. Many were wiping their eyes, others gazed sullenly into vacancy. A solemn hush, like that which prevails at a funeral, had taken possession of the assembly. "We cannot tell," the burgomaster repeated. "Peace to his ashes, for the fire which will be so destructive to us is still blazing in him. We can but say, may God forgive him, and let these be the last words uttered concerning him." "May God forgive him," murmured the sorely stricken assemblage. "Amen," replied the burgomaster. "And now, my friends, let us consult what is to be done. We cannot deceive ourselves concerning our situation. It is critical, nay hopeless. The first thing we must try to save is our honour. When it becomes known that one of our number, and that one the Christ, has deserted his colours, or rather the cross, we shall be disgraced, and our sacred cause must suffer. Our honour here is synonymous with the honour of God, and if we do not guard it for ourselves, we must for his sake." A murmur of assent answered him. He continued, "Therefore we must make every effort to keep the matter secret. We can say that Freya had suddenly succumbed to the exertion imposed by his part, and to save his life had been obliged to seek a warmer climate. Those who know us men of Ammergau will not believe that any one would retire on account of his health, nay, would prefer death rather than to interrupt the performances. But there are few who do know us." "God knows that," said the listeners mournfully. "Therefore I propose that we all promise to maintain the most absolute secrecy in regard to the real state of affairs and give the pretext just suggested to the public." Yes, we will agree not to say anything else," the men readily assented. "But the women, they will chatter," said Andreas Gross. "That is just what I fear. I can rely upon you men," replied the burgomaster, casting a stern glance at the girls and women. "The men are fully aware of the meaning and importance of our cause. It is bad enough that so many are not understood and supported by their wives. You, the women of Ammergau, alas that I must say it, you have done the place and the cause more harm by your gossip than you can answer for to the God who honours us with his holy mission. There is chattering and tattling where you think you can do so unpunished, and many things are whispered into the ears of the visitors which afterwards goes as false rumours through the world. You care nothing for the great cause, if you get an opportunity to gratify some bit of petty malice. Now you are weeping, are you not? Because we are ruined, the performances must cease. But are you sure that Joseph Freya would have been capable of treating us in this way, had it not been for the flood of gossip you poured out on him and his cousin, Josepha? It embittered his mind against us, and drove him into the stranger's arms. Has he not said 100 times that, if it were not for personating the Christ, he would have left Ammergau long ago? Where one bond is destroyed, another tears all the more easily. Take it as a lesson, and keep silence this time at least, if you can govern your feminine weakness so far. I shall make your husbands accountable for every word which escapes concerning this matter." Several of the women murmured and cast spiteful glances at the burgomaster. "To whom does this refer, who is said to have tattled?" asked a stout woman with a bold face. The burgomaster frowned. "It refers to those who feel guilty, and does not concern those who do not," he cried sternly. "The good silent women among you know very well that I do not mean them, and the others can take heed." A painful pause followed. The burgomaster's eyes rested threateningly upon the angry faces of the culprits. Those who felt that they were innocent gazed at him undisturbed. "I will answer for my wife. Nothing shall go from my house," protested one after another, and thus at least every effort would be made to save the honour of Ammergau and conceal their disgrace from the world. But now came the question how to save the play. A warm debate followed. The people, thus robbed of their hopes, wished to continue the performances at any cost, with any cast of characters. But here they encountered the resolute opposition of the burgomaster. Either well or not at all, was his ultimatum. We cannot deceive ourselves for a moment. At present, there is not one of us who can personate the Christ, except Thomas Rentner, and where, in that case, could we find a pilot? Who could replace Thomas Rentner? There was a violent discussion. The sacristan, Nathaniel, could play pilot. Who then would take Nathaniel? Ah, if this one and that one were still in the village. But they had gone away to seek their bread, like so many who could no longer earn a support since the Partenkirch school of carving had competed with the one in Ammergau. And many more would follow. If things went on in the same fashion, and matters were not improved by the play, in 10 years more there might be none to fill the parts. Necessity would gradually drive everyone away. Yes, we are in a sore strait, my friends. The company melts away more and more. The danger to the passion play constantly increases. If we can find no help now, penury will deprive us of some of our best performers ere the next time. And yet, my friends, believe me, I say it with a heavy heart, if we now continue with a poor cast of characters, we shall be lost wholly and forever, for then we shall have destroyed the reputation of the passion play. Thomas Rentner will personate the Christ well. There is no danger on that score. And if he does, if Rentner takes the Christ, the sacristan pilot, and someone else, Nathaniel, shall we not be obliged to study the whole piece again, and can that be done so rapidly? Can we commence our rehearsals afresh now, I ask you? Is it possible? The people hung their heads in hopeless discouragement. Our sole resource would be to find a Christ among those who are not in the play, and all who have talent are already employed. The others cannot be used if we desire to present an artistic whole. Despair seized upon the listeners. There was not a single one among them who had not invested his little all in furniture and beds for the strangers, and even incurred debts for the purpose, to say nothing of the universal poverty. New proposals were made, all of which the hapless burgomaster was compelled to reject. The general welfare is at a stake, and the burgomaster thinks only of the artistic whole. With these words, the wrath of the assembly was finally all directed against him, and those who fanned it were mainly the strangers attracted by the passion play, for purposes of speculation, who cared nothing how much it suffered in future, if only they made their money. "I know the elements which are stirring up strife here," said the burgomaster, scanning the assembly with his stern eyes, "but they shall not succeed in separating us old citizens of Ammergau, who have held together through every calamity. Friends, let the spirit which our forefathers have preserved for centuries save us from discord. Let us not deny the good old Ammergau nature in misfortune." "And with the good old nature you can starve," muttered the speculators. "If the burgomaster does not consider your interests of more importance than the fame of his success as stage manager, he ought to go to Munich and get the position. There he could give as many model performances as he desired." "Yes," cried another, "he is sacrificing our interests to his own vanity." During this accusation, the burgomaster remained standing with his figure drawn up to its full height. Only the dark, swollen vein on his weary brow betrayed the indignation seething in his soul. "I disdain to make any reply to such a charge. I know the hearts of my fellow citizens too well to fear that any one of them believes it." "No, certainly not," exclaimed the wiser ones. but the majority were silent in their wrathful despair. I know that many of you misjudge me, and I bear you no resentment for it. I admit that in such a period of storm and stress it is difficult to maintain an unprejudiced judgment. I know also that I myself have often bewildered your judgment, for it is impossible to create such a work without giving offence here and there. I know that many who feel wounded and slighted secretly resent it, and I do not blame them. Only I beg you to visit the rancour on me personally, not extend it to the cause and injure that out of opposition to me. In important moments like these, I beg you to let all private grudges drop and gather around me. In this one decisive hour, think only of the whole community, and not of all the wrongs the burgomaster may have done you individually. If I had only the interest of Amergau to guard, all would be well. But I have not only your welfare to protect, but the dignity of a cause for which I am responsible to God, so long as it remains in my hands. Human nature is weak and subject to external impressions. The religious conceptions of thousands depend upon the greater or less powerful illusion produced by the passion play as a moral symbol. This is a heavy responsibility in a time when negation and materialism are constantly undermining faith and dragging everything sacred in the dust. In such a period, the utmost perfection of detail is necessary, that the form at least may command respect where the essence is despised. I will try to make this dear to you by an example. The cynic who sneers at our worship of Mary and, with satirical satisfaction, paints the Virgin as the corpulent mother of 4 or 5 boys, will laugh at an altogetting Virgin, but grow silent and earnest before a Sistine Madonna. For here, the divinity in which he does not wish to believe confronts him in the work of art and compels his reverence. It is precisely in a period of materialism like the present that religious representation has its most grateful task. For the deeper man sinks into sensualism, the more accessible he is to sensual impressions, and the more easily religion can influence him through visible forms, repelling or attracting according to the defective or artistic treatment of the material. The religious sensuous impetus is the only one which can influence times like these. That is why the passion play is more important now than ever. God has bestowed upon me the modest talent of organization and a little artistic culture, that I may watch over it and see that those who come to us trustfully to seek their God do not go away with a secret disappointment, and that those who come to laugh may be quiet and ashamed. This is the great task allotted to me, which I have hitherto executed without regard for personal irritability and the injury of petty individual interests, and hope to accomplish even under stress of the most dire necessity. If you wish to oppose it, you should have given the office I occupy to someone who thinks the task less lofty and who is complaisant enough to sacrifice the noble to the petty. But see where you will end with the complaisant man who listens to everyone. See how soon anarchy will enter among you, for where individual guidance is lacking and everyone can assert his will, the seed of discord shoots up, overgrowing everything. Now you are all against me, but then you will be against one another, and while you are quarrelling and disputing, time will pass unused, and at last the first antiquated model will be seized because it can be most easily and quickly executed. But the modern world will turn away with a derisive laugh, saying, "We can't look at these peasant farces any more." Then answer for robbing thousands of a beautiful illusion and letting them return home poorer in faith and reverence than they came. Answer for it to God, whose sublime task you have degraded by an inferior performance, and lastly to yourselves for forgetting the future in the present gain, and to profit by the passion play a few more times now, ruin it for future decades. You do not believe it because, in this secluded village, you cannot know what the taste of our times demands. But I do, for I have lived in the outside world, and I tell you that whoever sees these incomplete performances will certainly not return and will make us a reputation, stamping us as bunglers forever. The burgomaster pressed his hand to his head. A keen pang was piercing his brain, and his heart also. "I have nothing more to add," he concluded, faintly. "But if you know anyone whom you believe could care for Amergau better than I am ready at any moment to place my office in his hands." Then, with one accord, every heart swelled with the old lofty feeling for the sacred cause of their ancestors and grateful appreciation of the man who had again roused it in them. No, he did not deserve that they should doubt him. He had again taught them to think like true natives of Amergau. Aye, they felt proudly that he was of the true stock. It was Amergau blood that flowed in his veins and streamed from the wounds which had been inflicted on his heart that day. They saw that they had wronged him, and they gathered with their old love and loyalty around the sorely beset man, ready to atone with their lives for these hot-blooded, easily influenced artists. Natures were nevertheless true to the core. The malcontents were forced to keep silence. No one listened to them. All flocked around the burgomaster. "We will stand by you, burgomaster. Only tell us what we are to do and how we can help ourselves. We rely wholly upon you." "Alas, my friends, I must reward your restored confidence with unpalatable counsel. Let us bear the misfortune like men. It is better to fell trees in the forest, go out as day labourers, nay, starve, rather than be faithless to the spirit of our ancestors." "Am I not right?" A storm of enthusiasm answered him. It was resolved to announce the close of the Passion Play for this decade. The document was signed by all the members of the community. "So it is ended for this year, for many of us perhaps for this life," said the burgomaster. "I thank all who have taken part in the play up to this time. I will report the receipts and expenditures within a few days. In consideration of the painful cause, we will dispense with any formal close." A very different mood from the former one now took possession of the assembly. All anxiety concerning material things vanished in the presence of a deeper sorrow. It was the great, mysterious grief of parting, which seized all who had to do anything connected with the passion. It seemed as if the roots of their hearts had become completely interwoven with it and must draw blood in being torn away, as if a part of their lives went with it. The old men felt the pang most keenly. "For the last time for this life," are words before whose dark portal we stand hesitating, be it where it may. But if this, for the last time, concerns the highest and dearest thing we possess on earth, they contain a fathomless gulf of sadness. Old Barabbas, the man of 90, was the first to express it. The others joined in, and the greybeards who had been young together and devoted their whole lives to the cause which to them was the highest in the world, sank into one another's arms, like a body of men condemned to death. Then one chanted the closing line of the choragus, "Till in the world beyond we meet," and all joined as with a single voice, the unutterable anguish of resigning that close communion with deity in which every one of them lived during this period, created its own ceremonial of farewell and found apt expression in those last words of the Passion Play. Then they shook hands with one another, exchanging a lifelong farewell. They knew that they should meet again the next day, in the same garments, but no longer what they now were, Roman governor and high priests, apostles and saints. They were excluded from the companionship of the Lord, for their Christ had not risen as usual. He had fled and faithlessly deserted his flock, ere their task could be fulfilled. It was doubly hard. Old Judas, the venerable Lechner, was so much moved that they were obliged to support him down the stairs, Judas weeping over Christ. The loyal man had suffered unutterably from the necessity of playing the traitor's part. The treachery now practised toward the sacred cause by the personator of Christ himself fairly broke his heart. "That I must live to witness this," he murmured, wringing his hands as he descended the steps. But Thomas Renner shook his handsome head and mournfully repeated the momentous words of Pilate, "What is truth?" With tears in his eyes, he held out his sinewy right hand consolingly to Caiaphas. "Don't take it so much to heart, burgomaster. God is still with us." Then he cast a sorrowful glance toward the corner of the room. "Poor Mary, I always thought so," he muttered compassionately under his breath and followed the others. The burgomaster and Ludwig were left behind alone and followed the direction of Rentner's glance. There, it almost broke their hearts. There sat the burgomaster's sister, the Mary in the corner, with her hands clasped in her lap, the very attitude in which she waited for the body of her crucified son. "Poor sister," said the burgomaster, deeply moved. "For what are you waiting? They will never bring him to you again." "He will come back, the poor martyr," she replied, her large eyes gazing with prophetic earnestness into vacancy. "He will come weary and wounded, perhaps betrayed by all." "Then I will have nothing to do with him," said the burgomaster in a low, firm tone. "You can do as you please, you are a man. But I, who have so long personated his mother, I will wait and receive and comfort him, as a mother cheers her erring child." "Oh, Anastasia!" A cry of pain escaped Ludwig's lips, and overwhelmed by emotion he turned away. The burgomaster, with tender sympathy, laid his hand upon his shoulder. "Ah, sister, Freya is not worthy that you should love him so." "How do I love him?" replied the girl. "I love him as eternal compassion loves the poor and suffering." "He is poor and suffering. Oh, do not think evil of him. He does not deserve it. He is good and noble. Believe me, a mother must know her child better," she added with the smile that reveals a breaking heart. She looked the drawing master kindly in the face. "Ludwig, we both understand him, do we not? We believe in him, though all condemn." Ludwig could not speak. He merely nodded silently and pressed Anastasia's hand, as if in recognition of the pledge. He was undergoing a superhuman conflict, but, with the strength peculiar to him, succeeded in repressing any display of emotion. The burgomaster stood mutely watching the scene, and neither of the three could decide which suffered most. He gazed in speechless grief at the clasped hands of his sister and his friend. How often he had wished for this moment, and now, what parted alone united them, and what united divided. "Aye, Freya has brought much misery upon us," he said with sullen resentment. "I only hope that he will never set foot again upon the soil of his forefathers." "Oh, brother, how can you speak so? You do not mean it." "I know that his heart will draw him back here. He will seek his home again, and he shall find it. You will not thrust him from you when he returns from foreign lands sorrowing and repentant. God knows how earnestly I wish him happiness, but I do not believe that he will possess it. And as he will be loyal to us in his inmost soul, we will be true to him and prepare a resting place when the world has nailed his heart upon the cross. Shall we not, Ludwig?" "Yes, by heaven we will," faltered Ludwig, and his tears fell on the beautiful head of the girl, who still sat motionless, as if she must wait here for the lost one. "Woman, behold thy son. Son, behold thy mother," stirred the air like a breath.